Hi, everyone. As you are entering the room, I just want to say hello and welcome. We're going to take just a couple of minutes to allow people to make their way here, and then we will get started momentarily. If you have questions, I'm going to go ahead and encourage you to start thinking about the things that you'd like to ask to our panelists. You can go ahead and pop them in the chat, and we'll work in those questions as we talk today. We'll also have some time towards the end of our conversation today to answer your questions as well. So thank you for joining us. We'll begin in about 2 minutes. And because no one likes dead air, or at least we don't like dead air in broadcast journalism, I'm going to talk to you just for a second. I'm popping in a link to a US data center map. If you have access to the chat, please go ahead and take a look at the link. If you are not familiar with data center projects in your state or region, it's a great resource for finding out what's being planned for the area in which you live. I know that I've been keeping track of plans for data centers here in North Carolina, as well as in my home state of Kentucky, and trying to keep family and friends up to date about what changes might be coming to their local area. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is my pleasure to introduce our guests for today's conversation. We thank everyone online for joining us here at Archiving the Black Web for this discussion about no more sacrifice zones. We're talking about activism and mobilizing the people to defend their neighborhoods, to be informed about what it means when a data center is planned for your neighborhood, and how everyday people can take action to intervene in the fate of the spaces in which they live, work, and play. We're joined today by two esteemed guests, Katie Miner and KeShaun Pearson. I'll read their bios and then we'll get started with a couple of questions. Katie Miner believes in responding to social shifts by acting in creative ways that generate new solutions. She practices innovation to her core. The Southwest Louisiana native is a former AmeriCorps public ally and has a range of experiences that have shaped her fluid worldview. From reconnecting opportunity to youth, to education and employment, to managing the build out of many movement based organizations' websites and databases, she is guided by the hopes and courage of those who have fought before and alongside us. Now, one thing to note is that Katie has worked as a mutual aid organizer, and she's leveraged the power of her social platform to work in solidarity with those who raised money for her hometown and home state and disperse over $100,000 in cash and resources to people impacted by hurricanes Laura, Delta, and Ida. When she is not serving as the Community Solutions Manager for the Alliance, she finds herself mothering one little person, which keeps her busy, I'm sure, gardening, as you can see by those beautiful plants in her background, and digging up some stories and things on Wikipedia. KeShaun Pearson is also with us today. KeShaun is a Memphis-based leader at the forefront of the fight for environmental justice. He's known for making complex issues accessible to the communities most affected by them. Excuse me. As executive director of Memphis Community Against Pollution, he leads campaigns to protect South Memphis residents from toxic air pollution and safeguard community health from corporate overreach. KeShaun's advocacy began in 2020 during the Byhalia Connection Pipeline fight, where he helped mobilize grassroots resistance against two multi-billion-dollar oil companies attempting to build through predominantly Black neighborhoods. Folks, we have today people who are here doing the work on the ground, and it is my pleasure to welcome them both. So, Katie and KeShaun, I say welcome to you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for having us.
Right. Thank you.
A
Thank you so
pleasure.
much for giving us the opportunity in the space.
It's our pleasure. Well, first things first, we know that time is a non-renewable resource. And so the question that I always like to open with is, what would you normally be doing on a day like today? It's Wednesday. We are at the second half of the year now, the second half of 2026. What would you normally be doing on a Wednesday afternoon?
I'll let Katie start.
No sweat. So usually once a month on Wednesdays, the Louisiana Public Service Commission, who is the elected body that oversees our electricity bills, they have their meetings on a Wednesday. So typically I'd be down at the state capitol or on Zoom, or on YouTube and literally listening to whatever nonsense they decide to spew for that day. Also criticizing and scrutinizing the decisions that they make in very closed chambers that impact over 4 million people.
Yeah. And for me, it'll be similar. Probably waking up to messages from community members about, probably news that came out earlier that morning because XAI, Elon Musk continued to expand throughout our cities like a virus is probably related to that. And then, further along in the day, probably participating as a member and the chairman of our community advisory board for the XAI funding, along with the city of Memphis. And so I was able to be able to be a part of that board because of our community and because of how we fought back and because our legislators had to figure out a way to put the community voice in the legislation to determine where these property taxes would be going. And then after that, probably participating in another meeting of some sort toward the end of the evening, rooted in environmental justice and fighting back against environmental racism, whether that is working directly with our elected officials, or it's just another community meeting that we're hosting to give our community data and educating them about what is in the air that we're breathing. Hey, Shai.
Well, both of you all talk about your origin and from being from the community, connecting with the community, and keeping that consistent in the work that you're doing. I'm curious for those people who are watching and want to know exactly how someone gets into this work. Could you tell us a little bit about your advocacy origin story? What is it that got you into this space?
For me, I didn't really have a choice, did I? I am from the home of the place they call Cancer Alley. I
Mm,
am from a place that experienced one of the worst environmental disasters in U.S. history.
yeah.
So most of my formative memories kind of coincide around environmental justice, environmental disaster. And when I got older, I'd always been a person who liked to match my intent to my impact. So I always, after, I got my start, my big girl job, as I call it, in hospitality, which is kind of the name of the game here in Louisiana, tourism. And so that's how I got my start, but it never really led me in the ways in which I wanted it to. And so I became a public ally. I signed up for that program through AmeriCorps. I was like, I want to be more intentionally stitched into my community, whether it's the community I was born in or the community that I chose, which is here in New Orleans. And that 9-month program with AmeriCorps Public Allies just really took the time to reshape the ways in which I participated in not just like capitalism, but patriarchy and just perpetuating the harms that people just kind of go with without much resistance. And so From there, I wound up at the mayor's office and I saw what it would look like to be in government, something I'd always aspired to, and was like, this is actually not at all what I want to do. I do not like this level of pressure. What other ways can I leave lasting impacts with folks? And after having my sweet baby, I found a home here at the Alliance for Affordable Energy, wherein energy justice, which is something I had never, let me tell you something. Working in electricity or how power is managed would have never crossed my radar if it was not for the mutual aid work I was doing on the ground. And it literally was a tweet, just a tweet, brought this organization to my attention. And I saw that for 40 years, they were the only folks in the state to advocate for the consumer, to make sure that people's electricity bills stayed affordable. They had a job opening. I applied and they were like, girl, we saw what you did for them hurricanes, girl. We saw that work. Yes, you need to be here. And next month will make 3 years that I've been working in energy justice, and it has honestly been the time of my life. KeShaun, what
Awesome.
about you, boo?
Listen, truthfully, a lot of what I have learned has been so reliant on the immediacy of the moment and connection to people. And sometimes actually think about what would it have looked like to have an AmeriCorps or like some organization that actually helped to build out pathways for people to get here. In Memphis, we don't have it. And if I'm being honest, my intent in my education has been around information technology and business. And so my entire goal was to create a helpful product for the world, but also to use technology and to use informatics in a way that uplifted Black families and Black folks specifically. I got my start because they was in my backyard and carving up, and we're planning to carve up the land where my grandmother is buried, carve up the land where, right next to the elementary school I went to. Environmental injustice, I had never put together. But I was raised in the Black church. And so I was raised in a theology and in a practice of caring for the least of these. In Matthew 25, right? It is how am I caring for the planet who cannot protect itself? How am I really leaning into supporting people and families like my own who are suffering because of these terrible and environmentally racist projects. And so for me, it was all on the go. Truthfully, I've not been able to truthfully, in a meaningful way, follow a process of education connected to an institution.
Hmm.
But thank God, right, for being able to find people along the way. Because being connected with the Southern Environmental Law Center, folks like Young, Gifted, and Green, folks like We Act, folks like KD, truthfully, I learned so much through the relationships that I have had, and I've learned so much independently, which is why education and learning is not reserved for institutions or reserved for what it always looked like. Because there's a lot of nights, a lot of books I've read, a lot of articles, and a lot of journalists and writers that I've been able to speak with who have shaped my understanding of environmental justice. And I've been able to use that information and been able to really foster somewhat of an education system for my community. And so what I didn't have, I'm helping to create through Memphis Community Against Pollution. And so the goal here is that we don't just be glad that the door opened for us, that we continue to hold it and then create that pathway for the generations to come, because it's going to take more than just us.
Right, absolutely. That we're links in this chain and trying to continue that work and bringing folks along with us. I love that both of you talk about, there's formal ways to sort of enter this work, but there's also informal ways, and in both senses, it has to be connected to the people. I want to talk a little bit about the people because our title for the webinar, if you're not familiar with the terminology, is a little bit cryptic. And we had a brief opportunity to chat about this before before we got started. Our title today is No More Sacrifice Zones, Organizing Against Data Center Pollution in the South. And I just have to ask exactly what is a sacrifice zone? What does that term mean?
I'll let KD go.
No, KeShaun, you tee it up, and I'm gonna
All
bring it
right,
home.
we'll do, we'll do. So the terminology sacrifice zones is from environmental justice advocate and truthfully one of the greatest theologians as it pertains to how we build relationship with the environment and then reflect on how the built environment has been harmful systemically for Black and brown people, but more specifically targeted at Black people. Mustafa Santiago Ali coined the term, or he is the person that I heard say it first, and so want to give him credit. But sacrifice zones are culmination, and in Southwest Memphis we know what it means to be a sacrifice zone because after the Reconstruction, we saw the Memphis Massacre. And then following the Memphis Massacre, we saw redlining all throughout our community. And that has regulated where Black people could live. And it's no surprise that the zoning around these redline areas is for heavy industrial. And so heavy industrial for the past generation was industry that look like oil refineries, that look like steel mills. And so we are still bearing the cumulative issues and the cumulative health impacts of these decisions. And when we think about sacrifice zones, it means that somebody is losing, somebody is dying, somebody is suffering in a specific area. And so what those areas tend to look like is how ours looks in Southwest Memphis. We have 17 toxic release inventory facilities. We have the highest cancer rate in our area. We have more children who experience asthma and respiratory illness related emergencies than anybody else in the state of Tennessee. We have a community, Mallory Heights, where they have the lowest life expectancy in all of Tennessee. And it's because our families had to live next to sterilizers who are putting out ethylene oxide, a known carcinogen, who are breathing in formaldehyde, a known carcinogen. And so when all of this toxic soup is what folks are being chronically exposed to, the health outcomes continue to reflect that. And so when you look at this geographical area, it's just one zip code, 38109, and we harbor so much of the pain, so much of the suffering. I lost both of my grandmothers and haven't been able to make memories with them for over 20 years. My nephews and my nieces, they had never known them. And it is a real price that we pay living in these quote unquote sacrifice zones. And so, as the call to action in the title says, no more sacrifice zones, no more choosing places where Black folks have been redlined into, or brown folks, or even our Native family members and siblings. No one should be sacrificed at the behest of these billion-dollar projects and all of the pollution and all of the pain and suffering that they bring.
Katie, you
How you did
mentioned
that.
that you live in Cancer Alley. You're from Cancer Alley. Can you tell us a little bit about what the picture of a sacrifice zone looks like in the places where you've lived and worked?
Absolutely. So when you think about, again, I'm a word girl, love words. When you think about what it means to be a sacrifice zone, this is an area that has been permanently changed due to the nature of the corporations in its area, right?
Mm.
These are the toxic releases, not in just in our air, but in our groundwater, our aquifers, our land. And Cancer Alley is probably one of the most well-known sacrifice zones in the United States.
Mhm.
Cancer Alley is an 85 mile stretch 85-mile stretch of land between our state capital of Baton Rouge and New Orleans. So we got two sides to an alley. I'm at the end of the alley in New Orleans. And for generations, over 200 chemical plants and refineries have made people suffer. And when you think about how Cancer Alley is situated, it's along the Mississippi River, right? this is an area where a lot of descendants of the enslaved live, right?
Mhm.
These are fence line, front line communities, people that have only ever known the land that they inhabit. And they have been smogged out and beaten down and poisoned their entire lives. I had the privilege recently of sitting as an advisory board member to a study that came out of Dillard University called the Collaborative Data Analysis. And it was really the first public health study of its kind in our state, wherein we took the qualitative data and the quantitative data, right? So we took Medicaid data, right? Publicly available, took that data and we went around the state and conducted focus groups. And we talked to people all over who live in clusters around these refineries to tell me about your experience. Tell me what life is
Mhm.
like for you. And then we matched that narrative to those numbers. And when I tell you, it was literally it shifted and changed and shook up the ways in which I just move in this space, right? I mean, we got when everything from, low birth rates, miscarriage
Come
rates,
on.
asthma, eczema, high cancer, rare cancer,
That's right.
highest incidences of rare cancers in the country sit in this 85-mile stretch. We got plants like, and I'm not going to name no names because you know how they like coming after people, but we got plants releasing toxins into the air that no other place in the world releases, right? We're talking about folks that build plastic bags, everything from plastic bags to jet fuel, all in this one area where all our Black folks are mostly situated,
Hmm.
right? And it literally shakes me to my core because if you take that ride, whether you're taking the interstate or the scenic route, you literally wonder how in the world has this been allowed to not just exist, but continue to exist decades and generations. I mean, the stories, y'all, just really the gaslighting, right? Oh, that no, it's you, right? Then you got this trend of folks like, okay, well, let me go get some genetic testing, right? Because I don't remember my family dealing with this, or and we get our genetic testing done, and they're like, no, baby, it's environmental. Everything that you're experiencing is because of the air that you're breathing in, and the water that industry has chlorinated because they've been digging into your aquifers and they've been releasing chloroprene, and you're sick because of what you live in.
Right.
And that should be the message. We're
That's
sick
right.
because of what we live in.
That's right.
I love hearing from both of you these insights about using the information that's available to you. And I just want to pause here and shout out Dillard University, my mother's alma mater, for their work on that report. One of my favorite quotes is attributed to Arthur Ashe, and it says, "Start where you are, use what you have, do what you can." And so
Mhm.
you mentioned this report where you've got publicly available data that the team at the university went out and had these conversations with people. You were part of that effort. Publicly available data means anyone can go and get it, right? And I think there's something to be said about our First Amendment rights to request information that perhaps isn't readily presented or made available. But I promised the people that we would make this accessible and give them some actionable tips and ideas of things that they could do if they want to get involved in similar work. And so I want to ask you both about what advice you would have for people who feel somewhat overwhelmed by the conversations around data centers and environmental pollution, for getting started with learning about the impact of these changes in their backyard. Where would you tell them to begin?
Yeah, this a shameless plug. I would say go to www.memphiscap.org. On our website, we have both a real account of what is going on with XAI and the data center that is reflective of the industry and what they are doing all across our country and across the world. And so we have documentary that was created by in partnership with More Perfect Union, and that is something that I think is very important. In addition to that, we also have our data. We had Harvard epidemiologists at Empower to do a study about how the proliferation of the data centers and the methane gas turbines that they come with, how are they going to affect our community? And so that data and that information is also available on our website. And so we have the data, we have the information, we have the personal accounts, and I think that's a great place to get started. But don't stop there. I think from there, the goal is to get involved where you are, and I think everyone should know that. As I said before, I didn't have any formal training in environmental justice before we got into this fight, and 5 years ago. To literally tomorrow, we're going to celebrate 5 years since we defeated the Byhalia Connection Pipeline project. And so in that time, I've learned so much, and it all comes from getting involved. Just like KD mentioned, it is listening to people's stories, it is hearing the horrors, but also empowering yourself and them with the next steps and how you can actually get involved and create change. There wasn't a community advisory board that was going to be able to determine what to do with this fund. There wasn't anybody who thought that pipeline was going to be stopped, and we did that. And it required people who didn't know a lot, who didn't know everything, just to get involved. And so find those folks in your area, in your region, and get involved. Literally, we all an email away.
Katie, how about you? Tips for people deciding that they want to know more. There's a story that's out about a data center or a similar project in their backyard. Where would you tell them to begin?
First, I would have a sit down with them and tell them take a deep breath because this tone of inevitability, it's made up. It's made up. We've defeated over $80 billion in projects. We're winning the narrative, right? Folks overwhelmingly do not want this stuff. Not only do they not want the infrastructure itself, but they don't really want AI, right? Right? We see what it's doing not just to us, to our children, to future generations, to just the ways in which we exist. So we got this, number one. Number two, now see, I have the privilege of working in a regulatory space, right? So I get to intervene or make these interventions when the utility, right, the people who generate and distribute your power, I have the privilege of reading through their stuff, right? So when they make an application, they submit it to our Public Service Commission, publicly available information. Again, this lives online. Go through that. Read through the stuff that they're saying, right? When it's not redacted, right? There is a totally separate conversation to be had around transparency in these
Mhm.
data centers. But read what you can. See what the utilities are saying, why they need it, where they plan to put it, how much we are expected to pay for it, right? Read through that stuff and then go to the meeting, right? Go to that Public Service Commission meeting, go to
So
that
what?
zoning and ordinance, go to that meeting, right? Because what I found in my short time in this space is when they see a professional coming in, right? When they see the interveners, when they see the big greens and the organizations come in, they're on their phone. Baby, I can't tell you. You can look on the YouTube and you'll see them just scrolling. They on Facebook reading comments, they making jokes. But when the public comes in to speak, when the people who are impacted by their decisions come in and say, I am on a fixed income, or they say, hey, I know your cousin, or I
Come
went
on.
to high school with you, right?
Real.
When they see them in the grocery store, that is the pressure, right? That's the sweat them, right? Make them sweat. Put your foot on their necks. Let them know that these decisions impact real people, right? You've seen your electricity bill go up, not just a dollar, maybe 10, 15, $20 a month, right? And when we're talking about affordability, right? When people aren't sure how they're going to pay their light bill, let alone gas in their car, right? And then you make that connection for people. Well, actually, the gas in your car is the same market that's affecting the gas on your light bill, right? When you start making these connections for people and letting them know there is an actual target, there is an actual place you can bring these concerns to, that they have to listen. That don't mean they have to do nothing, but you can at least bring that pressure, bring the public perception, embarrass them. Nothing moves our commissioners like embarrassment, baby. Shame. Shame works. Shame them folks for how they make your grandmother have to call you every month because she can't afford her bill. And now the little money you have, the little $20, you know how we good at circulating the same $20. Now we're having to make that $20 work 10 and 15 times over because we can't afford any of this stuff. There are people that are making these decisions. Go to that meeting.
That's it.
Love it. Take your snacks because those meetings can run long.
Look, they say no food allowed, but baby, I be hungry. And those meetings are sometimes like 5 and 6 hours long. Bring your snacks, bring your water, and bring that anger. Don't put it on a post on Facebook. Tell it to them directly in that public comment.
That's right.
Absolutely. Love that. As a journalist or recovering journalist, as I say, I got to make a plug here for also involving local media, getting them to ask questions, pointing them towards records that maybe you have questions about, and asking about some of that translation work that these professionals are able to do and need to have their attention called to from time to time. I also want to make mention of the whole setting that we're in. So this is archiving the Black web, and we're thinking about records and how records are kept over time. I think it's important for people to also consider some of the records that will tell them the stories of their communities. I know in my own hometown of Lexington, Kentucky, I think about where our electricity plant is and the decisions that were made about moving the plant from one place to another or switching to a different type of power, or what it meant to cool the plant and how that brought people out decades ago to think about how those decisions are being made. So going back in something like newspaper archives or archives where people have, the notes that they took to a meeting, like all of these things are tools that can be used and brought together to help to inform people so that they can mobilize. I think sometimes we overlook the power of information that's actually at our fingertips and readily available. That said, I want to go back to something, Katie, you and I talked about a couple of weeks ago. I put it to you that, my mother is in her 80s. I've been telling her age since I was a little girl. She's gonna get me about it. But I gave you the scenario where she is a person who wants to know more about what she can do. Where could she start? And you said she could start with her electricity bill. Now, if we are fortunate to live in homes, apartments that have lights and power inside, we've all got an electricity bill. What sort of things are we looking for on those bills that could give us some more information about what's going on in our communities?
Yeah, well, so it's important to note that bills look differently across the country, right? Because different people put what's on them. Utilities get the choice of what they say. Our regulators get to, comb out the verbiage, right? So for some folks, it might look like an FRP, which is a formula rate plan, right? That's usually that bulk cost, right?
Mhm.
That's what they say is the cost to literally run and manage the infrastructure, right? Then you see stuff like fuel adjustment costs, and that's the fuel to run the plant. Why is that separate from managing and operating, right? It gets real granular when you get in that bill, but most bills have a like literal breakdown of what each charge is, right? It's really important to monitor those charges, right? Especially when you live in a place like Louisiana. We get to lots of like storm restoration fees, right? So you would think, okay, if I'm already paying for the management and operation of these facilities, I mean, and they're getting a guaranteed rate of return on whatever I'm paying, why then am I now forced to come and help you recover or
Hmm.
help you to stabilize the grid that I've been paying for 10, 15, 20, 40, 60
Mhm.
years, right?
Hmm.
And so it's important to be the watchdog, right? Our organization, we call ourselves Watchdog. I want everyone to feel empowered to be the watchdog. Get your electricity bill every month and read those charges. And what you don't understand, call them people, right?
There's
Or
nothing.
look, we know older mamas and older folks like to get on that phone. Baby, get on that phone, pick up that phone, or send that letter, right? Handwrite
Mhm.
that letter to the people that make these decisions. Whether, in New Orleans, we are blessed that our utilities are regulated right at our city council. We don't have to go to the state. We go right down the street to Perdido and let those folks know, hey, why is this new energy company able to charge me 5 times on my
Hmm.
gas bill as opposed to when it was owned by that old one, right? Go to
Hmm.
those folks, pick up that phone, write that letter, send that email, make them tell them, explain it to me like I am 5 years old.
Hmm.
You get this money from me every month. Now you need to give me some information every month. So have
Hmm.
her scrutinize that bill. Those $5 charge increases, they
Hmm.
start to accumulate, and $5 this month then turn into 20. No, no, no. Make it make sense to me and explain it to me. And look for the help. A lot of these utilities offer assistance programs. A
Mhm.
lot of municipalities have types of assistance where it's whether it's the Council on Aging or some type of community action location. Seek out the help. There are people in almost every community. Well, I gotta take that back because we got a president that just lost the plot and and completely dismantled LIHEAP, which was the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program, right? Guaranteed money from the federal government to make sure states can help people stay cool when it's hot and stay warm when it's cold. He completely just threw it into the ether, right? And so the money's still there, but there are no folks to press the button. But still, seek out your local authorities on assistance for energy programs. They can help you navigate that bill.
Mm.
Thank you. I love that because everyone has a bill and we see those charges, but I think, ultimately we focus on what is the dollar amount and how much has it changed from the month before. I love that in reading the details of that bill, there are pathways to getting involved, even if it's as simple as simply demanding information and explanation of what the charges are and why they're being assessed to you. Similarly, speaking of records that people have access to, KeShaun, I know that Senator Bernie Sanders and in the House, Representative Alexandria or Ocasio, excuse me, I'm going to mess this totally up. AOC has
Mm.
introduced a bill to declare a moratorium on the development of data centers.
Mm.
Uh, we hear that you've done a little bit of work on that and you have some insight about it. What can you tell us about these bills?
Yeah. So, first, just gotta applaud Katie because that was incredible summation and very inclusive way to find your place in this fight. What I would add around the new moratorium bill is I've been gracious to have even been included in discussions about this with Senator Sanders and the Congresswoman AOC. This is a point, we are at a point in history where we have to make a very serious decision about where our country will go and how much power we will allow the tech oligarchs to exert over our people. And when I talk about our people, I also talk about it from an economic standpoint. We are funding
Hmm.
an extractive ecosystem
Hmm.
where we are on the losing end. We are paying in our taxes that are being diverted to subsidize these huge hyperscale data centers. We are also losing land in Memphis. XAI has purchased 522 acres of land after purchasing 18 acres, after $2 million square foot facilities, and now three. And so when we think about the necessary property taxes that will be abated, when we think about the amount of pollution from these methane gas turbines and the consistent call for independent generation that will ultimately continue to reinvigorate a fossil fuel industry build out like what we haven't seen in over 30 years, because we have the data about why we shouldn't be using coal. We have the data about why we shouldn't be burning so much methane gas. We know that greenhouse gases are accelerating climate change. We know that increases of nitrogen dioxide increase smog, and that hurts our families because it increases respiratory illnesses and issues. We have the data, we have the information about why data centers and this continued influx of artificial intelligence has been damaging. Even now, more so around the cognitive issues that folks are experiencing at even higher rates from continued reliance on a technology we don't have a lot of experience with. And in this exact moment, in this midterm, and truthfully going forward, we have to follow the example of communities who have put forth moratoriums to say, wait, the velocity of these projects is their strength. They have been able to move forward to build out and do so without any penalties. And that is because of how quickly they've been able to move, how slow public institutions like our health departments and even some city governments have, how slow that they have been to actually rectify the issue. And so the smartest thing, the best thing we can do in this moment is to push forward a moratorium federally that allows us the time to sit and prepare for what can possibly be an entire revolution as it pertains to industry, as it pertains to economics, as it pertains to workforce. But allowing this runaway train to steamroll our communities, especially our most vulnerable families, is wrong. It is immoral and it's cruel. And what we've seen in Memphis, what we continue to see in Louisiana, what we continue to see with the data centers that are proposed in Maryland, in Arizona, is that these folks do not care who they roll over. They do not care who suffers. They care about continuing to build out this ecosystem that continues to extract from us. Yes, and like to Mike's point, a carbon dioxide. And so there is a proliferation of things that are wrong, and so being able to work on legislation that helps us, not hurts us, being able to work with folks who are in politics at the federal level who actually care about people, right? We're seeing it all over the country, right? All in a lot of recent elections, people are being elected who actually care about people. What has happened is that corporations have been able to influence even the best politicians away from the people. And now people are saying no more. No more sacrifice zones. No more continuous bowing down to corporate oligarchs and allowing our people's voices to be silenced. No more of that. And so I'm so encouraged by Senator Sanders and Congresswoman AOC, and I look forward to hosting them. Hopefully, they're gonna come down to Memphis, and I'll be able to point at the data center to them, just so they can see what we are up against. I mean, it is truthfully us against a trillionaire, right? The world's first trillionaire, and that type of disparity shouldn't exist. And so, a moratorium is more than necessary.
All right, thank you. Um, Before we get into questions, I have a couple more questions for you, and I mean questions from the audience. I have a couple more questions for you about the particularities of data centers. We've had a chance to talk about this a little bit, but I think it's important for people to hear and understand, especially if this isn't something that's happening in their backyard just yet. What is it like to have a data center or a similar project put in your backyard? What are we talking about in terms of energy use, how the air changes, what the noise sounds like? Can you set the scene a little bit for us about what this extraction actually looks like as part of a lived experience?
You talking to me?
Either of you.
You start on you start at the ground level, and I'm gonna zoom out to statewide level.
Awesome, awesome. We can do it. So, man, it's truthfully, if I gotta be honest, it's somewhat heartbreaking. Um, Having a data center of the type that we have, the hyperscale with the amount of pollution, we've seen a 79% increase in nitrogen dioxide since XAI got here the first year. I have no idea what that number is going to look like today. It'll probably be a lot higher because they're using 57 35 megawatt methane gas turbines. Just for contrast, the first facility, Colossus 1, only used 33 methane gas turbines and they were 5 megawatts. That's what got us to the 79% increase. So 57 of 35 megawatt is extreme. And what has happened is what the epidemiologist told us, is that our community members are unfortunately die early. And I've lost just this year folks who live in Boxtown. Sam Knox passed away and last year, and then this year we call her Mama Collier. She recently passed away, and truthfully, it's just people have had comorbidities. People have you suffered with illnesses and ailments, but it is the continuous exposure to this pollution. It is the continuous exposure for our families over in South Haven to the noise pollution that is causing and wreaking so much havoc. It is having to wake up at 3 a.m. because construction has restarted after only being able to lie down at 11 a.m. when construction stopped. It is having to move your bedroom to a different place in your home because of the noise pollution. It is having the fear because you've had more asthma attacks this in the past 2 years since XAI arrived than you've had in a decade. It is so many detriments that comes with a data center. But in addition to that, you also have the Department of Justice intervening in a court case that would actually allow an alleviation from the pollution by shutting down the turbines, right? So you do see public institutions actually supporting the harm that is being done. You also, are very well aware of what the air tastes like, what it should smell like. And we got families, we wake up every day and it smells different. It tastes different. I have chronic allergies because I was born in Southwest Memphis. And if you're born in Southwest Memphis around all this pollution, you either get allergies or you get asthma. And I've had allergies so bad I've had to miss school myself. And so what we are experiencing now is just like in this last season, it was the most horrible allergy season I've ever experienced. And so, I mean, it is your lived experience changes. People who never had asthma before, who lived in Memphis on different sides of the city, are now contracting asthma and respiratory illnesses. And so, the reality of having a data center in your backyard is that you are under constant threat. Your body is constantly being subjected to a chronic amount of pollution that you should never have been in contact with in the first place. And it also has a sound. There is a hum, there's a murmur that continues throughout the day, throughout the night, where children who do have mental health issues they are worsening. Folks who are older in age are suffering, and it is complicating asthma, eczema, and so many other health issues that folks have. Having a data center in your backyard is something that you do not want. I continue to talk about that all over the country to anybody who will let me, because I don't believe anyone should be subjected to this type of harm just so folks can benefit financially. It is ridiculous. And again, it is cruel to subject any human being to this type of pain.
Thank you for
And they're
that.
ugly.
Yeah,
Sorry. And they're ugly.
real
There's no
bad.
word.
Real bad. I just want to say, or take the privilege of just taking the time to just thank KeShaun for his fight. I actually only met my friend a year ago,
Yeah.
and the ways in which my life has been enriched. This is my climate bestie, right? Like I feel so fortified in my fight by knowing you. So thank you for grounding in a sense
Mm.
what it's like to be in proximity to that. Thank you for just the fight that you've been leading that's been inspiring and encouraging so many people to get into it. When it comes to the fight we're having here in Louisiana, there's a link we shared earlier in the chat. Yeah, you look, listen, we the dynamic duo at this point. There's a link shared in the chat earlier, wherein on Friday, I've been kind of in this season of celebration. On Friday, our very own governor signed a moratorium on data centers here in Louisiana. And for a minute, I was like, yeah, boop, we won, y'all. Like, hey, he used the language we had been using, right? It was like, it's on, baby, y'all. But then I had to stop and think, because again, remember, the devil is always in the details, right? What does this moratorium have to do with the projects they've already approved? And that's what I want to talk about, the projects that they've already approved. When I met KeShaun a year ago, I was screaming into the void of space to anyone who would listen that, hey, Meta is coming to Louisiana, right? And what does that mean? Meta, this one customer, is asking for 3 times the power we use here in New Orleans on its hottest day. So just imagine you down in New Orleans for Essence Festival, which is this coming weekend. Shout out to Essence Festival. You know how hot, how humid it is. And when you go into a cool facility, just the relief you get. Imagine how much power that requires. Multiply that times 3, and one customer was asking for that. They were asking for 3 power plants, right? It takes forever to get one power plant approved, and they asked for 3 off the rip. And we were like, what? This is crazy. It's unheard of. Fast forward. Fast forward. And the whole time I was like, y'all, I've never been a person to believe in coincidence, right? This was too easy. Something is up. This is something in the water ain't clean. Lo and behold, after they got that approval for those 3 and sold the company, right? So Meta is no longer the owner of this data center. They sent it to this beignet investor, which literally the spice in my brain was shaking when they said that, because I bet these people had never had a beignet in their life, right? But you chose to co-opt my culture, right? You Columbus my culture, and now you're calling your wealth, your exorbitant wealth, beignets. Anyway, fast forward, the request was actually the plot was unfolded. They wanted 2 hyperscale data centers. So the original one for the 3, right across the street, they wanted a second one. So twin hyperscalers in Northeast Louisiana for a total of 10 gas plants. This one site, this one data center site, once it's online and fired up, will be the largest greenhouse gas emitter in the country. A data center is going to be emitting more power and more emissions than the 85-mile strip of Cancer Alley, right? We're talking about one of the highest energy users in the country will be right here in Louisiana. And we always know, or at least in this space, they say when they approve one, expect 3 more to come. Well, we got a pipeline of 15. They're saying they are actively courting more of these hyperscale. We're not talking about the little cute data centers that the hospitals and the 911 communication centers rely on. Those data centers have been around forever. Those are around the corner. You can see those, you can touch those. We're talking about these hyperscale, energy intensive, I call them teenagers of tech infrastructure, right? Because they eat up everything, right? They eat up all the power, they drink up all the water, they make all the noise, right? They're just
That's
constantly
funny.
irritated, right?
That's
These
real.
hyperscalers are coming in and they are targeting places with ease of access, right? Ease of access to administrators, which is the government and the elected officials, ease of access to resources. Again, 10 gas plants and uprating our nuclear facilities, right? This is at a scale that, again, and I hate to keep calling on oil and gas, y'all, but y'all, that's the lifeline of Louisiana. When oil and gas is saying, who is going to pay for this? Who does this benefit? I am not, I understand the small homes and $5 and $10 a month on their bills. I know that will wreak havoc on their livelihood. Imagine how much power I use as a refinery and how much their charges are going to affect our bills.
Mm.
We, as the highest energy users in the country, do not want to and cannot afford to pay for the cost of that data center. So they were like, all right, okay, well, let's figure this out, right? What other sneaky ways can we get around to get this power, right? So one of our largest utilities, they reached out a secret bid, an unsolicited bid to a power plant in Texas. I'm talking about old decrepit power plant, right? They tried to sneak this on, y'all, they tried to sneak this in through a different process. They sold it at a premium, so ended up charging like 300 million more dollars. So we got this 20, 30-year-old power plant that they sold at a premium. And the commission itself, they were like, hold up, this is gonna make people bills go up about $13 a month. Pressure. The people made the phone calls. Oh, hell no. You about to charge me for this old plant that's only going to work for 10 years, but I have to pay 40 years for it? No. That's how we got the moratorium. So that pressure campaign works. Sweat those people for these decisions that they're making, right? But it's too late for the ones they approved. The twin hyperscalers for Meta, the Anthropic Bitcoin facility that they're putting in West Feliciana, and the 3 Amazon campuses that we're getting in Shreveport. To be clear, these are all Black metropolitan cities that they are
Mhm.
clustering around, right? This moratorium does nothing to help those people or the state who will be
Mm.
who will be incurring these costs, but it's supposed to be setting up a framework for future development. What that says to me is we are very much so, we are still in the dating game, baby. This is Tinder, we swiping, and we looking for the best, the best or the worst suitor, right? In this instance, it's the worst suitors are coming down to Louisiana, raising up our electricity bills, using upwards of 25 million gallons of water a day, and
Mm.
increasing our already high levels of pollution. KeShaun, I want to call you so bad the other day because they said they're going to ask for 31 methane turbines for that meta site. And I said, where have I heard this before? Where have I heard this before?
Yeah.
And so we've got to step into the next phase of this fight wherein we're not just
Mhm.
fighting for our cities and our states, but we got to start talking about regional planning, right?
That's
Because
right.
wow, I got these hyperclusters in the north of my state. South Haven in Mississippi is right next door, and Tennessee is right above us.
Right
So
there.
what does it look like when the pollution in these small areas, it don't stay in the area like a force field. It's going to start to really inundate all of the South. And how is the South preparing people, folks who are already going to have to migrate because of the climate crisis,
Come
right?
on.
We're all going to have to go north of I-10 in Louisiana. What does it look like for the South to come together and consolidate all of these organizers and this power and say, all right, look, this is how we need to prepare for the next phase of this fight, and that is the cumulative impacts of all these destructive industries.
Thank you so much for these detailed responses. I saw in the chat one person asked for a clarification. What does all of this mean? It was around the time that you were talking about the size of the different plants. And now I am a recovering journalist and a journalism professor, not a mathematician. But I did look around and look for a couple of figures to see if I could break it down in everyday numbers. And what I found was that the average Walmart supercenter, if you will, uses somewhere between 3,000 and 5,000 kilowatt hours of electricity each day. That translates to about 1.25 to zero point 0.2 megawatts of power over a 24-hour period. If you take those numbers and multiply them times the number of turbines that we're talking about, then you get these pretty large figures. That's where we get something like 17 Walmarts or 8 Walmarts or 20 Walmarts in an area based on the number of turbines. So if people have questions about what it means for these power turbines to be in their neighborhoods, there's some calculations that they can do just back of the envelope, back of the napkin sort of math that we can do. We are actually out of time, but I do want to just pose the two questions that are in the chat. Millennia Friday, I hope I pronounced that correctly, has said that the feds lifted wetland protection in their recent impervious surface expansion through the EPA. My community in the low country of South Carolina does not have many projects yet, and I don't have a crystal ball, but I foresee this coming to the area because of the historical destruction of wetlands in the area. Are there precursors that we can look at, that we can look out for that signal this to communities? And how do we anticipate some of this?
Y'all, they changed the definition of wetlands. Isn't that crazy? They have
Yep.
literally changed the definition of what. Oh, yes, there are precursors, right? Ch So the Army Corps, right, they are responsible for what's called a 404 permit. Those are the permits for putting pipelines and things in waterways, right? You got to go through a river, a wetland, whatever that is. They have to publicly announce their intentions, right? So it's usually going to be in your local paper, or you can find it online for your local news paper website, right? That stuff has to be posted. Look out for those 404 announcements, right? Because that means something big, something that requires a really big pipeline is coming. Data centers need pipelines, right? We're going
Hmm.
to have a future conversation about gas infrastructure because that's what all this is, right? Data centers really are just the first cousin of the oil and gas industry, right? The cousin of natural gas and what that is looking like and how that's decimating communities. But for the few federal agencies that are still working, they are required to publicly notice folks, and the 404 permit almost always tells you that a big pipeline is coming and follow that lead.
Yep. I would also just lean into zoning changes. Everywhere they are making universal development code and zoning updates. And so you want to get ahead of the game as it pertains to that and also pay attention to zoning permitting. Folks are pulling permits for large surface areas and large abandoned buildings. Pay attention to what's happening there. But to KD's point and to the point of the person who wrote the question, they are reclassifying different land types in order to purchase and buy more land. One of the most one of the oldest imperialistic and capitalistic tactics is land grabs. And so huge swaths of land being sold is a sure giveaway that a data center or data center build out is happening. We got to be truthfully and honest about what's the reality of this is AI being used as a caveat for fossil fuel build out. The oil and gas industry is seeing true basically new people come in and try to play the same game. New people to come and try to pollute the same communities, new people to try to come in and benefit and off the same type of extraction. And so it's the same playbook. It's just new players.
Thank you. I appreciate making that connection that none of this is new, right? There's nothing new under the sun. This is an iteration of what we've seen in terms of the destruction of Black and brown neighborhoods. First, it was freeways. Now we're moving on to data centers. And the land grabs, the use of our resources, history is repeating itself. Um, the last question that we have, it's kind of a lighthearted one, but I think it might be insightful for people who are thinking about how can we encourage this level of awareness and engagement in our own families. Mike Harrington asked KeShaun, what was going on in your household that both you and your brother have become such ardent defenders of justice and public advocacy?
Listen, we was raised in the black church. We was raised in a loving and caring family where we didn't get rewarded for stepping on people, where you were responsible for one another. I am my brother's keeper is something that we were continuously told. as we were growing up, but we were showed what community really looks like when your aunts, your uncles, the folks that you don't know who live on the same street bring you food or bring you clothes. I am the oldest and the eldest of five sons to my parents. They had me at 15 and 16 years old. We grew up in abject poverty. And now, today, after going through so much and having to traveled through so many tribulations. My father is Reverend Jason C. Pearson, and my mother is Dr. Kimberly Owens-Pearson, and my brother is a state representative. And I'm gifted with the opportunity to lead our environmental justice organization that we founded together. And so, wherever you start is not indicative of where you will end. And what is happening, what has happened, and what will continue to happen in households everywhere. I pray is that we do find a sense of empathy, a sense of care, and find a way to love thy neighbor out loud. That's all activism is just loving your neighbor out loud. And so, in our household, and hopefully in households everywhere, we continue to keep that message alive.
We appreciate that. KD, any parting comments for our audience?
I love KeShaun so much. My mama drove a church van, so shout out to the Black church, right? And just the ways in which it taught us those like foundational lessons that literally
That's right.
carry around. Y'all, please don't forget about the South, right? Watch how you talk about the South in your language. This is where Black folks are, right? Don't dismiss us. Don't consolidate us to the loud voices
Mm.
of a few. We are working down here. We are fighting down here. And what happens here has implications throughout the country, as you just saw with the SCOTUS Calais decision. That was right here in Louisiana. Oh boy, that wrote what's the Project 2025? He right here from Louisiana, right? Some of the most
Mm,
dangerous people in our country right now came from here. But there's some magic down here, y'all.
that's right.
Something has to counter that, right? That magic from the swamplands is some fighters down here, y'all. The food is great, the people are greater, right? And so don't forget about us, not just in this data center fight, but all the false solutions. Keep us uplifted. Remember us. Send your resources here because people need them. And just continue to fight, y'all. We are actually winning this data center fight. Don't let up.
I think this conversation has been the epitome of what that great prophet Andre Benjamin said to us once upon a time, that the South's got something to
I would
say. Thank
say,
you all so much for being with us here today. Thank you to those of you who are in the audience today for this webinar. We anticipate that this series will return in the fall, but in the meantime, please stay tuned to events that Archiving the Black Web is doing in public spaces. You can check us out at archivingtheblackweb.org. Thank you all so much again for joining us. We so appreciate your time.
Thank you.
see y'all on Black Sky too. I see that. All right, y'all.